I don't even have my camera connected. I am slacking. It's because on my Zoom call, I can only have the Zoom open, not my camera and Zoom. Let's see here. Anytime now. There it goes. How we doing, guys? All right. So, we are going on and doing page 2 of Unit 11, Lesson 3. If you were here yesterday and you saw the video yesterday, some of you guys may have been a little confused with it. Some of you may have felt okay. After I go through what I'm going to go through, I think a lot of you guys are going to walk out fine. Hey, how you doing, Ella? So, I see a couple people jumping in here and there. Came back from a walk. Was it actually nice out down by you guys? It's been really like cloudy. I don't think it's gonna rain, but it looks like it's gonna downpour. It just looks gross out up here. Alright, so let's see here. Lesson 3. So yesterday we talked about 3 important things that we talked about on the front page, and I'm just going to kind of go back and touch up on them because we're going to be talking about them again today. Sine is the same thing as the y value, cosine is the same thing as the x value, and tangent is the same thing as saying the y over to the x. Okay, as long as the weather's nice, that's all that matters. So those are the 3 things that are important. And the other part that's going to be important is recognizing if our values are going to be positive or negative. So there's a new saying, and you're going to hear me say this saying a lot, and it's the add sugar to coffee. So just kind of, if you hear me say it, it's just me asking you guys, hey, is the answer positive or negative? So if you hear me say add sugar to coffee, it's me asking, is it positive or negative? So I'm going to do a couple practice problems. I think today's lesson is going to go by pretty quick because this is really an addendum to what we did in lesson 2. But I'm going to show you guys what the difference is. All right, and then I just have to do a quick review question with Pythagorean theorem to show you guys when we do it with trig, it's really the same thing. All right, so first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go straight to letter B. And I'm going to show you guys all the first steps that we're doing is exactly the same as lesson 2. I mean, this even goes back to lesson 1. Each lesson is just adding on an extra step. So if first thing we had to do was draw our x and y axis. And I guess I could write these steps off to the side for you after I'm done doing all these, but I don't know how everybody's feeling. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my initial ray, which is always going to be on the x-axis. And then 240 degrees is going to fall in the 3rd quadrant. So we're going to be down somewhere over here. And we now know the angle. I'm going to shrink this while I write so it's not taking up all the space. That's 240 degrees. So that's how far we rotated. However, when we go to solve these trig functions, it's kind of similar to what we did the other day when we were finding the coordinate. So we're looking for a coordinate just like we did, but in order to find the coordinate, what we did is we created our right triangle. So I'm just going to draw a vertical line connecting to the x-axis because your triangle will always go to the x-axis. I'm going to point out, if you guys did your homework, I have been grading them in Shobi, so if you go back and check your homeworks, I did leave some notes on some of yours. Some of you guys are trying to draw the right triangles to the y-axis. Just remember, a reference angle will always and only go to the x-axis, just like we did here. Now, in order to figure out this right triangle, we have to figure out what the angle is on the inside here. So since it's 240 degrees all the way around, we just have to find that little angle. Well, in order to find it, this is 180 degrees. So you just have to take that 240 and 180 and subtract them. So if we do 240 minus 180, you guys will get 60 degrees. So because this is 60, we now know that we're using a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So what I'm going to do is, because I wrote this down over here already, I'm going to take that triangle that we used yesterday and we used in lesson 2. That's our 30, 60, 90 triangle. And I'm just going to write in all the missing sides on the triangle we have below. So across from the 60 degree angle, we have that radical 3 over 2. So across from the 60, I have radical 3 over 2 right here. Across from the 30 degrees, we have our 1/2. And the hypotenuse is always 1. Because we're always going to use this using the unit circle. Now here's the thing. This is not asking us to find a coordinate. So this is why it's going to be slightly different from lesson 2. This is where your vocabulary is going to come into play. This is asking us to find the sine value. So we just said on the front page that the sine value is really just the y value. So if you look at our picture, it's just asking, hey, if we're doing the y value, which part would be the y value in your triangle? Well, since y values go up and down, we're just finding the line that is the vertical line, which in this case is radical 3 over 2. So the sine value at 240 is radical 3 over 2. Because again, if we're looking for the coordinate, this right here is going to be our x value, and this right here is going to be our y value. The only other part that you have to really look at is the new saying that I was saying, add sugar to coffee. The reason why I say the saying is because some of you guys forget to check to see if it's positive or negative. So the letters that I used the other day, and I'll flip back to the other page to go over it. A is always in the first quadrant, S is in the second, T is in the third, and C is in the last. This is right now is falling, this triangle fell in the T quadrant. T stood for tangent. So that means the only trig function that is positive in this quadrant is the tangent function. Everything else will be negative. So this should be negative radical 3 over 2. Some of you guys may already see that because radical 3 over 2 went down. So because it's going down, it has to be negative. Okay? So I'm just scrolling back to that first page again so you guys can see what I wrote in here. ASTC, add sugar to coffee. Since we were in that third quadrant, it's telling us the x and the y's have to be negative here. But since I was asking you to only find the sine, we were only looking for the y value, and now we're done. So the big thing that I want you guys to get out of today is this lesson is almost identical to what we did in lesson 2. It's just now we're adding in the words sine, cosine, and tangent, which just means, hey, are you looking for the x value or are you looking for the y value? Okay. So hopefully you guys aren't too lost with what I just did. I'm gonna do a few of these on here because this is pretty much it. I'm going to do that again a couple more times. I'm going to change one of the numbers on you guys because I had a lot of people asking me questions from homework number 2, which it will be good to do some practice as like a live thing while you guys are watching, and then we'll do some Pythagorean. All right, so I'm going to jump down. I'm probably going to do 1 sine, 1 cosine, 1 tangent. That's what I plan on doing with you guys. So I'm going to jump down to letter C. This one's 150 degrees. We're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to draw an x and y axis. And I'm just asking you guys to graph 150 degrees, which in this case would have to be quadrant 2. So I got my initial ray. It's going to be somewhere up here. And we know that's 150 degrees. So in order to find the cosine of this angle, what we have to do is draw in our right triangle like we did yesterday. So we got that little point up there, that little coordinate. I'm going to draw in my right triangle. So now in this case, we're trying to find this little leftover angle down here. Well, again, since this is 180 and that's 150, if we subtract the two, that will tell us what's left over. And 180 minus 150 is really just going to be 30 degrees. So once again, we're just using a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So 30, 60, 90. Again, that means we're using that triangle that we did in the previous problem. So I'm just going to keep writing it down. Obviously, a lot of you guys are going to start memorizing this triangle because you're going to be using it so often. I'm going to keep writing it down for note purposes. You don't have to write it down for every single problem. So again, hypotenuse is 1. Across from the 30 degrees is 1/2. And across from the 60 degrees is radical 3/2. So in this problem, I'm asking you guys to find the cosine of 150. Cosine, as we said on the front page, is really just the x value. So in this case, we're just looking for the number that's going sideways in the triangle. We're looking for the one that's horizontal. Well, the only one that's going horizontal in our triangle is that radical 3/2. The 1/2 is our y value because it's going up. So in this question, all they're asking us to state is what the x value is. And then after we figure out what the x value is, now you have to check to see if that x value is positive or negative. So that's where that little phrase that I use, add sugar to coffee, comes into play. So ASTC, this is in the second quadrant. So the only thing that is positive in the second quadrant is this S, and S stands for sine. So the only one that's positive is the sine value or the y value. That means in this case, this x value has to be negative. Again, you don't have to use that saying. I like using the saying because a lot of people have a hard time following through on the x-axis, but this went left. And you guys know, a lot of you guys are pretty comfortable with that. If this goes left, that means the x value has to be negative. So that's why I'm putting that negative out front. It's the same thing. Okay? All right. So far, I've just done those two. So before I go any further, I'll just kind of check to see if anybody's trying to like desperately type a question because I'm going too fast or whatnot. I mean, let me know what you're thinking. If I don't see comments, usually that means that I think you guys have a pretty good understanding of it. At least the people that I'm seeing in here right now, because everybody I'm seeing in here has been pretty good about getting their homework into me. So I'm going to skip all the way down to E. So this is a tangent one. And I'm skipping to E on purpose because it's also going to be a triangle that we haven't used yet. So, same steps, x and y axis. So this time we got 135. Again, 135 is going to be in the second quadrant. So I know I got 135 here, but we have to remember we're looking for the right triangle. So we have to create the right triangle. And this time we have tangent. So tangent's a little weird because tangent is asking us to find the slope. So in order to find the slope, it's the change in y over change in x. That's all tangent means. So tangent just means that we're looking for y over x. So this means we have to find both sides and then just divide them. So in this case, we have 135. Again, this is 180. So if we do 180 minus 135, we know that this angle in here is going to be 45. If you don't trust me, you can type it into your calculator, you can subtract it out, but that's 45 degrees. So this triangle is not going to be the one that we've been doing, the 30, 60, 90. It's going to be a 45, 45, 90. So I'm just going to draw in the little triangle off to the side. So a 45, 45, 90 triangle. Again, the hypotenuse is still going to be 1. But the fractions that we did the other day were radical 2 over 2. Okay. So I'm just going to plug all those in. And again, if you're confused on where I just got these numbers from, these are the numbers that we did in lesson number 2. I did it right here on the front page. So this is the front page of lesson 2. Notice the 3 things I have highlighted. 1, radical 2 over 2, radical 2 over 2 again. Okay, so it's the same exact thing. I'm just redrawing it for you guys so you don't have to flip back and forth through all of your notes. So now that means this has to be radical 2 over 2. This has to be radical 2 over 2. And that has to be 1. So tangent says that we have to take the y value and put it over the x value. So there's a little bit more work when we're working with tangent. Not a ton more, but again, x value goes sideways, y value goes up and down. So if I plug those in, I'm going to have radical 2 over 2 all over radical 2 over 2. Well, if we go to solve this out, you have the same thing on top and bottom. Well, if you have the same thing on top and bottom, you're going to get 1. Hence, y divided by x in this case is just going to be a value of 1. Okay, so this one actually didn't have that much more work because it worked out pretty nicely. Okay, so now the last part is just checking to see if it's positive or negative. So this is where that add sugar to coffee comes into play. So again, this is in the second quadrant. In the second quadrant, the only thing that's positive is the sine value. But I'm not asking you guys to find sine. I'm only asking you guys to find tangent. So that means that this tangent value, once again, is negative. So the final answer to this problem is just negative 1. Okay. So far I've done one of each. I've done a sine, a cosine, and a tangent. So again, if you have any questions with those, let me know. I'm going to do one more question with you guys. This one is probably going to be one that pops up on the homework. I can't remember if I gave one on the homework. I think I did. I'll switch to the homework after I do it and check. But what I'm going to do is I want you guys to go to letter D. I'm not going to use 45 degrees though. So I want to change it. And I might actually be doing a problem on the homework for you for all I know. And let's make this, I'm going to, oh, did it freeze on me? No, it goes. Let's make it, let's say, negative 270. Okay, so I want you guys to find the cosine of negative 270 degrees. So if you did homework number 2, you would have seen a question similar to this. Okay, so I'm going to draw my x and y axis. All the steps are still going to be the same, but you're going to notice something that happens here. Because if you do negative 270 degrees, we can't graph it unless it's positive. So I told you guys, if we want to make this positive, we have to add 360 degrees to it. And if we add 360, that's going to come out to be 90 degrees. So I've had a lot of questions about something like this already on homework number 2, as I mentioned. So we have our initial ray at the x-axis. 90 degrees falls here on the y-axis. So the coordinate is on the y-axis. There is no special triangle when it falls on the axes. All I'm asking you guys to do is figure out what that coordinate is. Well, because this is a unit circle, and when you go all the way around, that means the radius is always going to be 1, right? Well, because it's on the axes, we know that this height has to be 1 because it's going perfectly straight up in the air. That's the height. That's the y value. We also need to know the x value. Well, we didn't move sideways to get up to this point, right? We went up 1, but we didn't move anywhere left or right, so the x value is 0. So that's the coordinate to this. Now we just have to make sure that we're answering the question. Oops. I didn't realize I was going to take the part that I erased by accident. There we go. So now you just have to make sure you remember that this cosine right here is telling us that we only want to know the answer for x, because that's what cosine means. Cosine is telling us to find the x value of that coordinate. Well, we already know the x value. 0. I can't put a positive or negative sign in front of 0, so we know the answer is just 0, and we're done. So just remember, if it ever falls on that x-axis, you guys already know those points. You don't have to do any fancy triangle. That top one's at 0, 1. This one, you went over to the left. I guess I should be pointing this way based on how you're seeing it. You were going over to the left, -1, 0. This one you went down -1, so it would be 0, -1. And this one over here would be 1, 0. So if you're falling on the x-axis, you just or y-axis, you have to know those 4 points. It's always a unit circle, so you're always counting by 1. Okay? So I think I did a question similar to that on the homework. Let's see here. Homework number 3. Did I? I'm trying to look at these 4. Yep. I'll tell you guys right now, letter C is like that question I just did with you guys. Okay? Very, very similar. Just show it out for me. I don't think I did it for any other one as I'm looking at it. It looks like all the other ones are going to be like what we just did. Okay? So, I just got to show you guys this last part with some Pythagorean theorem, which I think a lot of you guys are going to feel very, very comfortable with. So, in exercise number 4, it says that the Pythagorean identity states that for any angle theta, cosine theta squared plus sine theta squared is equal to 1. This can be found by using the Pythagorean theorem on the triangle from the beginning of the lesson. So at the beginning of the lesson, I told you guys that if you have a triangle, sine theta is always going to represent the height because it's the y value. It goes up and down. Cosine is always going to represent your horizontal. And because it's a unit circle, the hypotenuse is always 1. So if we use Pythagorean theorem, it's a right triangle. It's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So that's where this formula is coming from. I'm not making up this formula. It just comes from the right triangle, and it's coming from the formula you guys already know. So for this problem, I just want you to use the formula, and in part A, I want you to find what cosine is. So we're just going to solve it out like normal Pythagorean theorem. If we know that the formula is cosine squared plus sine squared equals 1, well, we don't know what cosine is. That's what we're trying to find. So I'm going to write cosine theta squared plus, we do know what sine is, though. because it tells us if it is known that sine theta is equal to 3/5. So since sine theta is equal to 3/5, I'm just going to plug that in. I'm going to substitute it in. So I have 3/5 squared, and it's all equal to 1. Because the hypotenuse is always 1. I mean, we could square 1. If you do 1 squared, it's still going to be 1. Now, our goal is to just get that cosine all by itself. So we're just using regular algebra. And yes, you are going to be using fractions, so don't be afraid to use your calculator. You have a calculator to use. So I can't solve cosine theta squared, so I can leave that the same. 3/5 squared is really just going to be 9/25 because you're just squaring the top and squaring the bottom. Now I have to subtract the 9/25 to the other side. So I have cosine theta squared is equal to, well, if I subtract that over, that's going to be 16/25. And again, if you don't trust me, you guys have a calculator. Now, in order to get rid of a squared, we got to square root both sides. So the squareds would cancel out on the left, and we're left with cosine theta is equal to, well, if you do the square root of 16, that's going to be 4. And if you do the square root of 25, that's going to be 5. Now, here's the thing. We are working with square roots. Square roots means there's always 2 solutions. So you guys have learned in the past, if you ever square root something, there was something that we have to put out front. And that's going to be plus or minus. Ella, in order to, here, I'll write it, I'll zoom in for you. What I did is I subtracted 9/25 from both sides. So if you do 1 minus 9/25, if you type that in the calculator, your calculator will reduce it for you. Actually, no, it would be 16/25 because 16/25 doesn't reduce. So that's where it's coming from. So the reason why it's plus or minus 4/5 is because we don't know what quadrant it's in. Cosine is positive in some quadrants, but it's negative in other quadrants. So we have to put that plus or minus there. Now, if I told you guys I only wanted you to find the second quadrant, then you would have to check to see if the x value in the second quadrant is positive or negative. And we'll do a lot more practice with those. As of right now, I just want to make sure you guys can follow Pythagorean theorem and you can solve for whatever the trig function is. Okay? Part B is the same exact thing. Do you guys want me to do another one of the Pythagorean theorems? If somebody wants me to do it, I'll do it. But it's really the same thing as part A. It's just giving you cosine and asking you to find sine instead. So if somebody says they want me to do it, I will. I don't have a problem doing it. My next lesson isn't until 4. But I'm right at the 30-minute mark now. And I'll just leave it this way. If you guys feel comfortable, lesson is over. Homework is going to look very similar to this. So you guys should be okay going to do that. If nobody wants me to do it, then we're good. We're good. I'll put it this way. If somebody wants that question or wants some more practice, shoot me an email. I could work it out for you and I can email it to you. Okay? So that goes for anybody that's watching this on YouTube later. Same thing. If you guys want it done or you want it checked because you tried it on your own, just let me know. The only key thing I want to point out in part B is it says put it in simplest radical form. So make sure you reduce the radical when you're done. So if you had square root of 8, make sure you're doing your factor tree and you're breaking it down and simplifying it. That's all. All right. Well, if you guys don't have any questions for me, I'll end it there. And yeah, so I hope you guys have a great evening. Hopefully it still stays a little bit nice out so you guys can go out and do something. Enjoy, and I will talk to you guys all soon. All right? Get your homework in if you haven't done it. Miss you guys.